So our next speaker is Dr. Yuri Balas from Charles University in Prague. Dr. Balas is on the Faculty of Physical Education and Sport. His topic is on muscle oxygenation in climbing research. This is scheduled for a 30-minute presentation. And I'd like to mention I'm very pleased that we have a presentation on climbing. We've got quite a group of users in Europe that are using Moxy for climbing applications. So this is definitely a well-timed presentation. So let's see, we're seeing your screen, Dr. Balas. Oh, I'm there now. Can we hear your mic?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, hello from Prague. So actually the place where the Congress should have been organized. And it's a little bit a pity that you cannot see our beautiful city and taste our beer. So nevertheless, I am actually opening Czech session as the next three presenters are from Czech Republic. So that's why I have here also the Czech flag. So my name Jiří Baláš. I'm working at Sport Research Center at Charles University, Faculty of Physical Education and Sport. And my topic of interest is around climbing and outdoor sports. And I have done quite a lot of research around climbing and muscle oxygen. And regularly I'm working with Czech national climbing team. So the topic of my presentation will be around muscle oxygen in climbers. And for who are not familiar with this sport, I will shortly present what is climbing and the main discipline. And I will focus on forearm flexor endurance and muscle oxygen kinetics and the ways how to evaluate it. And shortly, because this is also one topic which is not discussed much, I will be speaking about the reliability of different muscle oxygen parameters. Let's go. So actually, climbing has two main disciplines. The first one is called sport climbing or lead climbing, which is climbing on a rock or on indoor wall, generally from 10 to 30 meters. The duration is quite long, somewhere between 2 to 7 minutes, but on the rock it can take up to 20 minutes. So it's like more endurance activity. What is typical, there are quite a lot of intermittent isometric contraction of forearms, so somewhere between 30–70%. So half of the time you spend in isometric contractions. And the mean time on a hold, on small hold, it's around 8–10 seconds. So that's lead climbing. The second very popular discipline is bouldering, which is very short climbing without any security equipment. It's low over the ground, and very short, powerful move are typical for this sport. What is known that forearm isometric strength and endurance are considered as a main determinant of climbing performance. I will skip the problematic of strength. I will focus just on endurance. So the first problem, how to assess finger endurance, is how to evaluate it. Most of the trainers, even the researchers, they use the so-called dead hangs. Actually, you see it on the picture. You hang with both hands on a rung until you fall and you measure the time. This is quite good predictor of climbing ability. However, it's more measure of strength because the intensity is dictated by your maximal voluntary contraction and body mass, and it's not a good indicator of your endurance. So that's why recent studies use another ways of evaluating forearm endurance in climbers, and the ways are either sustained contraction and some percentage of maximal force, or intermittent contraction at some percentage of maximal voluntary contraction. I will shortly recapitulate what happens in the muscle. When we start isometric contraction, so at around 20–30% of MVC, there is partial venous occlusion, which is complete at around 50–75% of maximal force. So that's what's happened during sustained or continuous contraction. When we apply intermittent contraction, there is like partial relief of the occlusion of the muscle pressure, and there is influx of oxygen in the muscle tissue, and we can expect fast resynthesis of adenosine triphosphate. That's an illustrative picture of tissue oxygenation during sustained contraction. So after the forearm contraction at 40%, you see quite a big drop of tissue oxygenation until the end of the exercise. When the intermittent exercise is applied, you see so the phase of deoxygenation and reoxygenation. So here is nicely see what happens with tissue deoxygenation. When we apply these two ways of testing in climbers, and we will compare sustained contraction, we will find no time differences between climbers and non-climbers. It's at the first sight surprising, but actually as climbers are stronger, they do this exercise at much higher intensity. What is interesting, if we apply the same intensity during intermittent exercise, climbers are much better than non-climbers, and something had to happen, and what is the reason to prolong their performance in the intermittent test? It's that something has to happen in these relief periods of contraction. Let's look at one of the first climbing paper on muscle oxygenation by McLeod et al. He compared intermittent contraction between non-climbers and climbers. So the contraction was for 10 seconds, the recovery period for 3 seconds. So this is the contraction phase, and this is the recovery phase. And you can clearly see that the non-climbers, they are not able to desaturate the muscle. On the vertical axis, that's the oxygen hemoglobin. climbers can desaturate much more, and during the relief periods, they can reoxygenate much more than non-climbers. Later studies focus on intermittent testing, and they compare the role or the effect of discipline. So if the same happens in boulders and lead climbers, and if the way of recovery can affect this recovery period. So I will show data from our study. Because when you climb, generally you don't have the hand on the hold all the time. You shake the hand near the body. So we compare two ways of recovery periods during intermittent contraction. One was with shaking hands near the body. It's here as active recovery, and passive recovery, just the climbers left the hand on the hold. The time to fire during the intermittent testing was increased when there was shaking hands. So during active recovery, there was like 15% better time or higher time in this condition. If we look closer to the results, beginner climbers or lower grade climbers, actually there were no differences if they shake their hands or not. So the results was the same. If it was a lead climber, so adapted for endurance climbing, we can see large differences between active recovery and passive recovery. However, climbers focus mostly on strength training, boulders. There were not such big differences. During this testing, we use MOXIE, and it nicely copy the time. So during active recovery, there was higher reoxygenation, and this higher reoxygenation, or the highest reoxygenation, was found in endurance athletes, the lowest in boulders, so strength-oriented athletes. So that was the intermittent contraction. We can also find some interesting data from sustained contraction. This is also one of the first study on sustained contraction in climbers by Simon Fryer et al. So he used sustained contraction as 40% of MVC in non-climbers, lower grade, advanced and elite climbers. And again, you can see that in non-climbers, there is a very low drop of TSI. However, in elite climber, there is a big drop of TSI. There is again the effect of discipline. The boulder climbers, they have lower drop than endurance climbers. So it seems that this tissue reoxygenation, deoxygenation, or the maximal level of desaturation or deoxygenation is quite nice parameter to evaluate climbers. So our next question was, how reliable are these parameters? So we performed or we conducted one study with around 30 climbers. They did the intermittent testing, in the same condition. This was done with Artemis, with the Portamon. We place the Portamon on the flexor digitorum profundus at the same place. It was marked by pen. We tried to really replicate well the condition, and let's see the results. So during the 10-minute rest, or after 10-minute rest, you can see quite like in gray colors, you can see quite reliable data. However, in some person, which are indicated in black, there was a big variation. We don't know why. So in total, the total variation of TSI in resting condition was around 10%. So the maximal level of desaturation or deoxygenation during the intermittent test was much less reliable. So you can see the individual variation. And sometimes we saw the differences in the first trial. He had the maximal desaturation 40%, in the second 20%. So 20% difference, and we don't know why. So sometimes we have to be really careful when using this parameter with Portamon. Probably, or maybe with Moxie will be different, I don't know. But in this case, we observed this happens. So the coefficient of variation was 24%. And the last parameter.
Dr. Ballas, I'll just jump in here just a second. We've got about 10 minutes left, maybe 12 minutes left of the presentation. And I'll remind everyone, if you have questions for Dr. Ballas, you can type those into the questions panel. So go ahead. You can go ahead and continue with the presentation.
Okay, thank you. So the last parameter during the reliability study was actually the delta, the level of tissue deoxygenation or reoxygenation, or in this case, deoxygenation during contraction. And this parameter was quite reliable. Not many cases or not many subjects differ. So that's why recently a group of researchers around Simon Fryer started to use another parameter, which is half time for tissue oxygen resaturation, which was already shown as a valid and reliable parameter. So actually, it's a TSI resaturation after complete occlusion, which is somewhere between 3 to 5 minutes. And this muscle oxidative capacity index was used to predict climbing ability. So when applied to around 30 climbers, the time of half time of recovery range somewhere from 5 to 10 seconds. Better climbers or higher performing climbers had shorter time. And this time of recovery or muscle oxidative capacity index was found as a significant predictor of climbing ability. But it was just one parameter. The same research group used several indicators to predict aerobic capacity and related to predict sport climbing ability. So what this group used, again, they used this oxidative capacity index or half-time recovery time. On the vertical axis here, that's the climbing ability on some scale. On the x-axis, there is the time, half-time to recovery. So again, it predicts well climbing ability. So the same is with maximal TSI desaturation. And the last figure is actually specific VO2 peak, which was measured by portable metabolic analyzer. And there is also at the central level that you can see also the relationship to muscle consumption or to oxygen consumption. So when putting all this together, so the muscle and central oxygen kinetic predicted really well sport climbing ability level. The adjusted R2 squared was 67%. And it just underlines that muscle oxygen kinetic and central oxygen kinetics are important determinant, important factors of sport climbing performance. So I am coming to conclude my presentation. Near-infrared spectroscopy seems to provide reliable data to assess muscle oxygen changes. However, we should pay attention when evaluate absolute measures of oxygenation. More reliable is to see some mean level or mean deoxygenation parameters. And certainly, if we want to have the full picture of oxygen kinetics, the combination of several techniques from occlusion to sustain and incremental testing should be used. And also different parameters from oxidative capacity index to minimal level of saturation or maximal level of desaturation or the delta of tissue saturation. So thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Balazs. We have a few questions here for you, or we've got one coming in here. Why is the resaturation time associated with the muscle oxidative capacity index?
So you mean this time?
Yes.
Okay. So that the muscle oxidative capacity index actually is the name for half time for tissue oxygen resaturation. We assume that more quickly you are able to resaturate your TSI or tissue saturation. So more oxidative capacity you have. So we expect that there is greater vasodilatation of capillaries in the observed muscle. There is higher mitochondrial density. So there are several factors which can affect the speed of resaturation. So that's why it was called muscle oxidative capacity index. So it's a complex index, and it seems to be valid.
Okay, thank you. The next question: given the variability you have seen, if you were using resaturation halftime, how many measurements would you take to be comfortable with an individual's capacity? And what would you think would be a meaningful change after a training block?
So you mean the resaturation during intermittent contraction?
Yeah, I believe so. So how many measurements would you have to take to be comfortable that you understood an individual's capacity?
That's a nice question. I don't know. According to the reliability study, firstly, I would try to do like repeated measurement with the same individual to see on the same place, even if if you can do some peng marks. So just to try if I can have the same value of reoxygenation, deoxygenation over the time. And when I am more sure about the place, about the methods, then actually I can the fourth, fifth measurement will be I want to say valid, but you will have a more complex picture what happens in the muscle. And if you want to do some like intervention study, training study, certainly it's not good to have just one measurement at the beginning. So plan at least 2-3 measurements to be sure what you measure, and the same do it after the like training period. After 8 weeks period, again do 2-3 measurement to see what really happens in the muscle. I wouldn't rely just on one measurement. That's my opinion with monitors we use. We use both Moxie and Portamon.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for the presentation. Excellent work. We look forward to seeing that continue. We will, if there's any additional questions for Dr. Ballas, of course you can follow up on the Discord chat